Let's just give you time to warm up.
If you go out, then
Hi, I'm Jay Bernard Kynes, and I'm delighted to announce that I'm broadcasting from Winneba, Ghana. And I'm here with two of my best friends and colleagues, Michael Cook, who's to my right, and Louis Cola to my left. Before the three of us engage you and share with you the experiences that we are having here in Ghana, I want to open with you with the meditation that I often do, but I will be shorter today than I traditionally am. So our meditation today begins with the Ting Shawls. Ting Shawls calls us and remind us of our spiritualness and our spirituality that lives within us. It surrounds the area, clears the energy, so that as we begin, we bring forth the presence of our ancestors. So join in with me as we begin with this broadcast from Ghana, the Progressively Yours Wealth and Health broadcast. So at this time, we pay homage to our ancestors who began in this place, and this soil of the motherland. And we are so honored, humbled, and privileged to have the opportunity to share with you. And as we honor the presence of our ancestors in this space, in this place, to clear all energies that would try to inhibit us from sharing what we want to share, what we feel that will contribute to your health and wellness, mind, body, and spirit. We say thank you to those who paid a price that we will never be able to live up to. Therefore, we honor our ancestors, the Africans who made it from this shore to South America and North America, and those who survived that transatlantic voyage. We are their descendants. Therefore, here we are. And because they were, we are. And because we are, they were. It is for the ancestors that we come. Ashe. Namaste. Amen. Thank you. It is a delight again to be with you here from Ghana. The title of our show is SANKOFA. What is the definition of SANKOFA? SANKOFA is a bird symbol, as you can see on our screen, which symbolizes a bird who turns back and she retrieves the egg on her back while she's moving forward at the same time. It says to us that it is very, very okay for us to return to retrieve that which is good for us, mind, body, spirit of our history, while simultaneously moving forward. So we're not stuck in the rear, but we cherish what is in behind us, what was behind us that was left behind, to enhance our life while we move forward, carry on what the ancestors would have us to carry on. I want to introduce my two friends and my colleagues, and then our producer, who is also with us. So there are four of us from the U.S., one born in Ghana but resides in the U.S. His name is Louis Kohler. Louis was born in Ghana but has spent most of his time in the United States. Louis, tell us a little bit about Louis Kohler, my friend and my brother.
Well, thank you, Brother Kai. Thank you for your warm invitation and suggestion to join you in this podcast on this day. As you had rightly observed, I was born and raised here in Ghana and left Ghana, moved to United States when I was 22, and I have lived in the United States now almost 40 years. So it is a pleasure to have you, my brother Michael, and my brother Anthony here with me. And I'm looking forward for the conversation that we're going to be sharing with your audience on this day. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Yes, sir. And like myself, I am from South Georgia, a place called Cordele. And I'm so honored and blessed to have a fellow Georgian from South Georgia, where the sweetest onions in the world are grown. They call it the Vidalia onions. And also with us, Michael Lee Cook from Vidalia, Georgia. Michael, so honored that you are on the show with us today. I know you came to have fun, not to work. Tell us a little bit about Michael Cook.
Well, that is true, Brother Kynes. I came to Ghana to rediscover my roots. I didn't intend to work. There's been a history of overworking blacks in Africa for free. And I've fallen into that vein. The reality of it is that I am from Vidalia, Georgia. That's South Georgia. And grew up with my mother and my brother. And quite surprising to be here today. I spend most of my time working as a psychotherapist, particularly a family therapist, which means that it's all about health and wellness. And so I'm so glad to be here today to talk about some of the experiences that I have encountered since I've been here in Ghana and their relationship to health and wellness. And I'm just delighted to be here. Quite surprising, but nevertheless, quite delighted to be here.
Thank you. Now we're gonna have fun. I know we're kind of sitting close, and so we're tight, but that doesn't mean we're tight. We're gonna loosen up as we go along. So have fun along with us and enjoy what we want to share. I want to first begin, and I want to mention our producer Anthony Granberry, who is an outstanding brother and friend who is keeping us on point. And we appreciate his love, his guidance, and his support as we are producing the show. So we have two producers, Toya, who is back in the U.S. And I know, Toya, thank you for what you're doing as you edit and put this together for us while we're here. Anthony, we want to thank you for helping us stay focused and do what we need to do. We're going to share with you what our experience has been up to this point, which has been at the Amino Castle, Dungeon, Fort, and we will flush that out as we move forward. But I want to talk with Michael, and Louis a little bit more. And so, Louis, I want to ask you to share what is it like to have been born in Ghana, yes, and now live in the U.S. as one who now sees both sides. What is that experience like for you? And then move into what the experience of our visit yesterday to the fort was like. I'm gonna use the words interchangeably, fort, and Louis and Michael can share more about that, and I will also about Fort, Castle, and Dungeon.
Well, as I indicated earlier, when I was born and raised in Ghana, both my parents, my father and my mother, were originally from Nigeria. They migrated to Ghana, particularly Accra, in the late 40s, and so I was born along with my 8 siblings here in Ghana, and I left Ghana when I was 22. That was in 1986 to move to the U.S. And it, I hope it won't surprise you to know that even though I was here until the age of 22, I had never visited Amina Castle dungeon, which will be using interchangeably. I've never. So my first time to actually visit Cape Coast, and particularly Elmina Castle, was with my friends sitting with me here, and it was quite an experience. And I think we're going to be getting into that a little bit more. So leaving Ghana at the age of 22, as you can imagine, that is a period in which a young person is kind of coming into their own, coming to a sense of identity, grounding, yourself in a particular locality, and coming to some recognition about who you are in the world and how you engage the world. So a lot of that began here, but it continued to unfold when I was in US. And when I came to US, of course, I had to learn, the cultural environment in the US. I was very intentional, and I think it's important to make this. As a Black person, I wanted to make sure that I was immersed in the African American experience. I didn't want to come to the US and live or act as if I was still in Ghana. I wanted to immerse myself in the African American experience. And so that became extremely important to me, which I have been able to do along the way. But I continue to maintain, my African identity, and it continued to provide me a lens through which I navigate my life, my experiences, my relationship in the United States. I'm very grateful, that I had that, a point of reference. My Africanness was a point of reference that enabled me to navigate and to work out my life, my work, my relationship in the United States. I think if I didn't have that, I probably would have been absorbed into the American experience. I didn't want to. I wanted to have that experience, but I didn't want to be completely absorbed by it. I wanted to maintain my Ghanaian, my Nigerian identity, and in almost 40 years, those multiple identities continue to serve me in so many ways, including this particular visit with my friends here in Ghana.
Thank you. Yeah, and we will flush that out a little bit more, because I'm sure there will be some interchange between both your experience in America and in Ghana, and in particular, what may have been stirred within you during our visit at the Amino Castle yesterday. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mike, I want to turn to you. What is it like for you growing up in South Georgia, Vidalia, to recognize from whence you've come, to be here now in Ghana, to visit the castle, and we're going to come back and talk more between the three of us. But what's that initial response that has been stirred inside of you from when you think about your roots in Vidalia, Georgia, to now here in Ghana in the castle?
Well, it really is a very good question, because one of the things that, one of the questions that have always plagued me since I was a little boy, I've always wondered how did I ever get here in Vidalia, Georgia? How did I ever find myself in Vidalia, right? How did my people find themselves there? And one of the things that the experience of going to Elamina Castle did for me was to help me sort of put that kind of question at the forefront again in my life. And what it helped me to do, it helped me to see that my place in a place like South Georgia, Vidalia, really didn't originate there. Mm-hmm. That sort of journey originated in a place like Elamina Island, Elamina Castle. And so to be able to see that where I came from, it didn't start where I thought it started. It started farther back than what I had expected. And so being able to come and make those connections, I'm already immediately left with the understanding that whatever I thought of myself is much broader and deeper than what I ever imagined. And coming to the castle yesterday really reminded me of that in ways in which I never could have imagined.
You said something that I wanted to expand a little bit, and that is bigger than I've imagined. Being born in the U.S., in Vidalia, and coming to Ghana and having the recognition that your life is more than you could have imagined in terms of your identity. Why is it important, you think, for those who are watching or listening back home to understand that we and let's be specific, as African Americans, Black Americans, whatever term we want to use right now, understand in terms of their overall, their mental health, their spiritual health, that understanding that we are more than what we see from the vantage point of being born and having grown up in America. Say a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things about it, just as a quick note, you might imagine it as trying to read a book of 400 pages, and there were chapters missing out of the book, pages missing out of the book. And you're only going to be able to read the books in depth so much because the pages have been torn out. But when you find the whole book and put pages back in, then the story becomes a bit more complete. The stress of reading that book is less than it would be if you had to continue to try to find the pages. Coming to Ghana is helping me to actually find the pages, the missing pages of the book I've been told about myself for so very long. You have to keep in mind that the story that I've been telling about myself has only been told out of the information that I've been provided over the course of my life. Now I'm at a place where I can begin to sift through what I've been told and put together something that's more consistent with me as a person. It helps me to get integrated. And anyone knows that a person who knows less about themselves will be more fragmented mentally, physically, spiritually than someone who knows more about themselves. And so it's all about integration. It's all about moving away from a sense of fragmentation as a person and moving closer together as an integrated person, taking parts of yourself that you did not know, you didn't have access to, and you began to formulate a more integrated. And that is really what the word integrity means, to find yourself as an integral person rather than fragmentation, broken off into a million pieces and a million different stories without really understanding who you are. But a person who has more integration in their lives in terms of their own story, they're going to have stronger mental health, stronger physical health, and stronger spiritual health.
Yeah, thank you. And I can identify with that. Our host, Dr. Imani Ma'at, thank you for hosting back in the U.S. for us, and appreciate what you're doing for us as we broadcast from abroad. I identify with Michael in the sense that I was born in New York and grew up in South Georgia, also a place called Cordele. And in my early formation, the only elements that I knew about Africa was what I would see on television. It was Tarzan, and it was a glorified white guy who was coming to Africa to conquer, and he was king. And then the miseducation that we did not receive in public school education did not give us all of the information, especially, I should qualify that, especially when we had to go through desegregation. Prior to desegregation, and when we were segregated, we were being informed to some degree that there were other places like Africa, where we were from Africa, and that was helpful. was not so much helpful within the church context, because we had to take on the theology of what the West was teaching us. But so growing up in small town Cordele, where it was segregated and divided, did get a clear sense of my own identity. I came to Ghana in the year of the return in 2019, and the experience was very transformative for me when I went through the castles that we're talking about now, and just the touring of those facilities, the smelling of the stench, especially in the female dungeons, where you could smell all of the body fluids these hundreds and hundreds of years later, is so impacting to know that our ancestors started not on the shores of America in Charleston or Savannah, but here in Africa. And they were not slaves, they were African citizens. Lewis, jump in. How does, when I say they were African citizens, not slaves, what does this impact you because you're a native born of the land?
I do believe that is such a significant point that cannot be overstretched, in the sense that the people that lived here and were moved to the Western Hemisphere were Africans. They were not slaves. They were Africans. Because I think there's a conversation that oftentimes took place relative to the identity of our brothers and sisters in the U.S. as if the story started as slave. The story did not start as slave. The story started as individuals who were somebody's brothers, mothers, friends, sister, and so on and so forth. They had distinct and undeniable identity that had nothing to do with slavery before the colonizers, whether they were Dutch or Danish or Portuguese, took them out of this, area and onto the Western Hemisphere. So I think it's important. My colleague, Michael mentioned just a moment ago this question about integrity, which I also think is intricately connected with identity. And not only is it intricately connected with identity, it's also connected with purpose, right? If you don't know who you are, how do you know what you're supposed to be and do in this world? So I think coming back to Ghana, four of us having, the experience that we have at Elmina Castle dungeon, that we all got connected to something that was bigger than ourselves individually, that there was a history in that place that is part of our history, that perhaps we could not have gotten, connected with any books or any story unless you are actually here. And so being at the Elmina Castle together, the four of us, for me, I think not only connected us with something larger than ourselves, but also connected us with each other in a very deeper, meaningful, and impactful way. I think it grounds us, and perhaps we continue to ground us and continue to give us some sense of direction and purpose as we continue to unpack and to explore the full meaning of the experience that we had on yesterday. So again, to kind of summarize what I'm trying to get at here, the title of this particular podcast is SANKOFA. It's an Akan language, right? That has a sort of metaphorical meaning that you go back, right, in order to retrieve something special, something precious, something significant that will enable you to integrate a part of yourself, that can provide you with direction, purpose as you imagine and envision the future. So what we've experienced, hopefully what we continue to experience during our time here in Ghana, is about remembering, and somebody once told me that when we remember, When we remember, we are able to remember ourselves. There's something about remembering. There's something about looking back that once again supports the idea that Michael was talking about integration and identity.
So on that one word, let us say, for the sake of conversation, people who say, well, why should I remember? Why is remembering so important to my health and wellness? That's what we are about here on the Progressively Yours Health and Wellness podcast. Louis, so why is remembering important to my overall health, in your opinion?
So I'll give you some of my thoughts on that. I think, so remember the whole idea of dementia or Alzheimer, right? It is when you're not able to remember even your own son, your own daughter, your own name, your own self. So there's something disintegrating, disorganizing, destructuring that is related to not being able to remember. So when you remember, there is something deeply psychological, spiritual, and mentally that allows for a sense of coming together, a sense of integration, a sense of cohesiveness, right? That without being able to, let me give you one single example. If I do not remember what happened yesterday, or day before yesterday, or last week, or last month, that means this morning when I wake up, I will have to relearn everything else, including how to wear my shoes, how to get a direction to where I want to go. So there's something about remembering that enables you to not only imagine or reimagine today, but the future that lies ahead for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Connected, disconnected from the past, from the present, and potential future when you don't remember.
Yes, gotcha. Michael,
Yes.
I want to turn to you and continuing this theme that Louis just articulated for us, not only remembering, but growing up in the U.S. and America. You and I early on may have heard that I don't want to remember Africa. I don't want to have anything to do with Africa. And a lot of that, and some of that message even came forth through the church.
Mm-hmm.
What say you based on what you experienced yesterday? I noticed you took a piece of the wall when we went to the castle. What say you about those who might say this has no relevance for me and remembering and going back? I'm an American.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that particularly struck me yesterday, and that will always keep with me, is that we have to remember that Africans, our ancestors, did not begin in horror.
Amen.
Our ancestors began in a place of creativity, imagination. They were building lives. They had lives in which they were enjoying. Just imagine you're sitting at home playing chess, talking over dinner with your kids, or planning, an outing with your kids the next day, and someone comes in your house and snatches you away, steals you away from your family, and began to take you to a place where you began to experience a sense of horror. That person who has been stolen is not empty. That person goes into that horror with a story for which they have to remember in order to give themselves strength to go forward. So the reason why we would want to remember and to get a better sense of the story is because we have to remember that most of the stories that we've ever been told about Africans is that we've been told about them being weak, being manipulated, just being taken advantage of without any type of resistance. But the truth of the matter is that our ancestors actually had strong stories about who they were long before they became getting involved in this horror story. And mind you, that this horror story was instituted first and foremost by two dynamics, the dynamics of economics and the dynamics of religion. Their horror was rooted primarily in economic interest and religious interest. And so what we have to do is we have to remember
When you say there, who was the there to which you
The
were?
Africans' horror,
Okay.
their experiences of being stolen was primarily motivated by two factors outside of themselves: economics and religion. And the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, they had economic interest and they had religious interests that they literally placed upon Africans when they stole them.
Yeah, that's the point I was nudging you about, is that the Portugals, the Dutch, the English, it was for them the economic element that they infused in their religiosity or their theology to help
Yes.
later enslave the Africans who were tending to their own life from day to day. Is that what I hear you saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying. It's because we have to keep in mind that Africans were not the Dutch, the Portuguese, what I call the captors. The Africans were not their first choice. They attempted to do the exact same thing to Native Americans, but Native Americans proved from a psychological and physical aspect not to be able to withstand the brutality of the experience of slavery. Africans, the strength that they had within themselves, in their history, in their families, living in this environment, gave them a certain kind of gift. And as my friend Lewis has pointed out, their very gifts, their very strengths were turned against them in this whole process of captivity. And so we would want to remember, so that we can remember not only the horror stories, but we need to remember that these horror stories were born out of economic and religious interests that had absolutely nothing to do with Africans.
And their humanity.
And the reality of it is that these Africans, our ancestors, had tremendous lives long before the colonizers and the captors showed up. So remembering helps us to see that there's far more to the story than merely our ancestors being in chains, placed on boats, run out in the fields, destroyed. It's more to that story. And so remembering helps us to go further back to put the story together in a more complete way. And I would just say this, that I have such an appreciation for the fact that there must have been something within our ancestors that just cannot be accounted for, that made it possible for them to leave a palace, to go into a dungeon, and to survive on the other side of the world. There must have been something extraordinary. And so for me, I think it had something to do with their mental health, and I think it had something to do with their physical health, and I think it has something to do with their spiritual health. Something that we too can grab hold of and begin to institute in our own lives, because there was strength there before there was a dungeon.
Absolutely.
You know, I want to piggyback on that in terms of the dungeon. You've noticed that we've used the word castle, dungeon, fort because they fought, they being the Portugal, the British, and the French fought against each other. And you can see the cannons on top of these castles. We move from the word castle because castle indicates that of royalty. And there was nothing royal that was happening in those places. The Africans built these castles, these forts, dungeons, that they would be enslaved, and we use the word enslaved, by these captors in order to help produce an economic livelihood later as they would make this transatlantic voyage to South America first, Brazil, Jamaica, etc., later North America. And it was brutal, pure brutal. I'd like for us to talk about a little bit more of the emotional impact as we move through sections in these dungeons. And I began, for me, it was always the smell that remains to this day, more in the female dungeons than the male dungeons because of the bodily fluids, all of the bodily fluids that our women would release from their bodies. And when you imagine in a close packed area, as Michael and Lewis are sitting tight, so you imagine being chained and locked with someone that you do not know. And if you have to go relieve yourself, you have to find a way to communicate with the person that you are enchained to. And if you couldn't, you would relieve yourself where you were. The odors from the body's fluids remain. And when I think of that, and I can feel the wailing when you're in those quarters. The other impactful moment was when we went into the governor's quarters, which was above the courtyard, and he could look down upon women and make his selection for one to be brought to his quarters to have his way with her. The other thing that's not mentioned too much, and the four of us have talked about this, is that our men, who they were more interested in because of the physical labor, not only were our women raped, but so were our Black African brothers. To set example that if you don't comply, this is what will happen to you. On top of that, the church established by the Portuguese within these dungeons set the religious tone so that they could use the religion to justify what they were carrying out. Misappropriation, as our producer would say, of the text for economic purpose in the long run. Now, this is important because these theologies still operate today in our own land, here and abroad. And they continue to hold us captive if we don't understand the implications of the origins, I should say, if we don't remember, as Lewis pointed out, these early beginnings. This is why this journey, this pilgrimage for the four of us is so very important. This is what just walking through these various areas in the fourth dungeon, the castle, how it impacts us emotionally, spiritually, physically. What part impacted you as we were making the journey through, Lewis?
I think Michael talked about the potential double evil of economics and religion. And I use the word potential because, again, as a producer would tell us, people have a unique way or different way of appropriating religion as well as economic processes. But what was most shocking to me all my life, I'm a third generation Christian, meaning my grandparents were Christians, my parents were Christian, and I chose the Christian religion as a means or a way by which I connect to a reality that is greater and bigger than myself. But the contradiction that I saw at the Elmina dungeon was why the phenomena of stealing away, if you will, snatching away of Africans from their native land was going on within that dungeon. And Michael has referred to it as the horror. We can call it the traumatization of African people. While that was going on, there was a religious activity going on along that. I find that rather emotionally troubling. You know, uh, very difficult for me to understand how someone can honestly and sincerely worship the God of creation, the God of the universe, the God of love, but yet actively and willingly participate, in what was going on in that dungeon. That was deeply, deeply shocking, surprising, and and disturbing for me. So that is one thing. The other point that I also wanted to make, and I think Michael was alluding to this early on. I think the very existence of the African American community in South America, North America, is a testimony to the resilience and the power and the strength and the creativity of our people. As Michael mentioned as well, that this experiment
in which they were
Still going. So I'm sorry about that. We had interruption, but I'm sure Toya will fuse that together for us. And Michael, why don't you share with us and the audience the striking piece for you as it relates to your experience moving through the dungeon? What was most impacting?
One of the things that really struck me about moving through the dungeons is, and these were slave dungeons. These were enslaved Africans. These were African people who were enslaved in these dungeons. And one of the most striking things to me was the lengths in which these captors went in order to control the minds and the bodies and the souls of those that they had captured. I had an experience yesterday of being able to look out into what is considered the door of no return. And it was quite frightening. Here I am, a free person in so many ways, to go to that small window and that small door for which a very frightened people had to come to. Really was quite striking to me. It had to be something of more of a horror story to look outside of that window, knowing that that would be the last time that you would see yourself in the land in which you have known all your life. And to go into these dungeons and to be able to hold on to the steel bars for which our ancestors held on to. It was an amazing experience in the sense that these captors went to they had no lengths that they would not go to in order to keep these ancestors of ours confined. And when you hold the metal bars, it literally was a place in which you could not escape from. And it just struck me to the lengths in which these captors would go in order to keep a person. Mm. And to know that it had to have a tremendous mental toll, took a mental toll on a person to know that by all means, there was no way to escape. And when I went in and saw again this door of no return, felt these bars, looked at some of the ball and chains in which these folks were put into, the shackles, it just reminded me of the lengths again that these captors went. And these captors did not just go with these different techniques, but they actually supported it by their religion, a religion that spoke of love, and what they were doing was nothing but pure evil. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to whitewash that. There's no way to argue that away. There's no way to defend that in any form or fashion. Another thing that struck me was Africa. Folks had traditional religions for which they, in fact, prayed to God and prayed to the gods. And I just wondered to myself, after spending all those years and decades praying to God, what must they have thought about their own religion when they were in those cold dungeons with no possibility of escape? That had to break their hearts and minds in a way in which I cannot even imagine. Mm. And so one of our tour guides, the tour guide that we had, reminded us of one thing. He said that when people die, in this case our ancestors, they never die. They are always with us. So going through that dungeon yesterday, we were with millions and millions and millions of people who are still with us today. And we were able to touch the walls in which they laid on and cried out. And we take on that as we experience it here and as we go back to our home in America.
On that point of going back to our home in America, we go back to our clinical practice. All four of us are practicing clinicians, of counselors, psychotherapists in various dimensions. We do work with families, we do groups, and we work with individuals every day. And so briefly, Louis, what do you see from this experience with implications? Does this inform you with respect to our clinical work or your clinical work in particular?
I think one of the things that I would take away from this experience is, I think, the power of story, and how we tell, how we listen, and how we interpret our stories. That is, for me, I think is very important. And one of the ways that I will continue to utilize this experience, as I mentioned earlier on, is no matter who comes to see me, whether they come as an individual, whether they come to see me as a couple, or whether they come to see me as a family, I wanted to be able to hear their story, not only hear the story of pain and trauma and horror in their lives, but it's also the story of strength, of creativity, of resilience, of grace, of love, of power in their story. Because it seems to me that part of this living of this life is that those two reality tend to sit side by side. Like one of my professors would say, pari passu, And so I would take that away from this experience. I've always had that, but this experience has further reinforced that every human being, has some strength, some resilience, some creativity that reside in them by the mere fact of their existence. And our job is to look for that, not only in ourselves, but to look for it, in the people that we'll encounter. And I think that is perhaps, as Michael mentioned early on, that some group of people are not able to see. They see another human being as a means to an end, as an economic, a reason, as a religious, as an entity to manipulate, utilizing the tool of religious, ideas. But I think the importance of being able to see our humanity and our strength, the presence of grace, of love, of wonders, in our lives as well as in the lives of those we will encounter, becomes important for me as a result of this experience that we share together.
Thank you. Michael, same question.
Well, one of the things that I would have to say too is that the first thing that I will take back in how it will impact my clinical work is that when my clients meet me when I return, they will meet a new counselor. I have been changed. Therefore, the experiences that I would have with them will be changed. Because what I've done and what I've recognized is that I had in some ways fallen asleep on my own story. And I had fallen asleep on my own life. Coming here has awakened me to things that I thought I knew or thought I understood. And in the same way, many of my clients have fallen asleep on their own lives and fallen asleep on their own stories. And what I take back is this new profound interest that what we all must do in order to at least experience good mental health, good physical health, and good spiritual health is that we have to become awakened to our own stories in our own lives. In essence, we have to make ourselves a project. We have to become a research project so that we might understand where we come from and what we have been about. And so that's what will come across to me. And the other thing I would say too, that I will take back with me is the reality that what I do in my work is going to have to rise to a level of not like we might say in America right now, we have a lot of people saying, I'm woke, I'm woke, I'm woke. But when I think about when people say I'm woke, that's something about some superficial economic thing that may be going on, but not being awoken to the long, tremendous history and the story that resides in us as people.
Yeah.
So Black Lives Matter is not woke in the same way as returning to Africa and understanding the long history of what it meant to have strength before a person experienced horror. So my job is to help real awakenness in a person and to keep them alive to their story, keep them alive to my story, so that we might truly be woke.
Amen.
Thank you. Powerful.
Amen.
We have only a few moments left, and I echo the sentiments of what you both have said as relates to my own practice. I have I think we all do a very diverse practice, and most of my clients have encouraged me to come, and as if they are hungry for whatever I'm going to bring back. You mentioned I'm changed. I'm changed again, and so they are anticipating because, let's face it, would not be able to come to Africa, to Ghana, and so what we have to bring back the message and the story, not only within our clinical context practice, we have to find a way to spread this message through our lens the best that we can, so that others can experience even vicariously, which can be moving within themselves, the experience of new transformation, new change. The other thing that I'll take back has nothing to do with the clinical component. It's just the fellowship with four Black men here on the continent is a very, very powerful experience for me. To be with you four brothers is transforming in and of itself, because as we all know that Black men have been the target of so much of the ill will for the purpose of the economic ends to be. And that's not taking anything away from our sisters, but it was the Black men that they needed for the physical labor. And so to be able to fellowship as brethren together is very, very important for me.
One thing I would like to say, if I may, Brother Kynes, is this ideal of Black Lives Matter and its connection to this visit. One of the things that I see is that Black Lives Matter, for good, bad, or otherwise, again, reaches the limits of Black Lives Matter within the context of American society. What this visit has indicated to me is that we're truly talking about Black Lives Matter. It must stretch back across the transatlantic slave story.
Yes.
And it must go even beyond the dungeons, back to the original villages and experiences in which folks have had long before the horror story began.
Right.
So Black Lives Matter must again reach back well beyond what positions we can get in corporate America, how much police brutality we can stop, what kind of political policies we can create, but it must stretch back across the sea, beyond the dungeons, beyond the horror story, to truly capture what it really means to say that Black lives matter.
Amen.
And I wanted to echo that very quickly to the sentiment that Michael just mentioned. The first president of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said on the day Ghana obtained its independence in his speech that the independence of Ghana would be meaningless if it's not connected to the independence of the rest of Africa. And I think that is the sentiment that, Michael just clearly, articulated, that as Black people all over the world, that when one life is impacted, our whole lives is impacted, right? So Black Lives Matter, as Michael once observed, really must be expanded beyond the United States or England or the Caribbean, to include those who are also here on the continent of Africa. Our lives are deeply, deeply connected. We're not separated, we're not disconnected, even though there are stories that tend to suggest that we are deeply connected more than we can ever imagine.
Brothers, we have to bring it to an end. Unfortunately, we could go on and on and on from Winnipeg, Ghana. Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast is presented proudly from the motherland. And I want to thank you both for sharing from the depths of your heart. Michael Cook, Louis Kohler, Anthony Granberry, Dr. Imani, and Toya. We turn the broadcast over to you, and those of you who have watched and endured and hopefully enjoyed, not in an entertainment way, but the information of our experience that we wanted to share with you today. This podcast, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We all have a lot of work to do. And God being our helper, the ancestors being our inspiration, our love for one another, we reach with compassion for the betterment of the total health, mind, body, spirit. Educationally, we must reach out and reach one another. So, from Winnipeg, Ghana, I, J. Bernard Kynes, not the same little boy who grew up in South Georgia, a place called Cordele, Georgia. No, 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 no. Even though Cordele is in me, I always will be. But I know now by being here that I'm bigger than some of the things that I experienced in Cordele because of being able to come here. Michael, who'd have thunk it? Can anything good come out of Vidalia? Anything good come out of Cordele? And we know everything good come out of Africa.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
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 Amen. Anthony, thank you. We end it now.
Yes.
We also got some preacher in us, and we can go on and on, but we'll stop. Dr. Money, I want to thank you for hosting this podcast. Appreciate your leadership. Appreciate that you and Toya are holding together for us. And I will see you soon for our next podcast. In fact, I'll be traveling back on the week of our next podcast. So it'll be 2 weeks before I'll be back in America. Thank you all.
Peace out.
Goodbye.
Peace out.
Ashe.
Peace out.